What up, guys? KTOD Matty here, hitting you with the aggression Luke deck tech. I think Luke is a leader that a lot of people are kind of undervaluing right now. He is a strong unit once he hits the board, and if you can find a good way to get him out there without falling too far behind, he has the ability to take over the game, especially cheaply with his Luke's lightsaber, his ability to keep guys alive, and some of the tools in aggression and in vigilance will help him do that. All right, guys, so here it is. Here is my aggression Luke deck. I've actually been playtesting this for a couple months now and just haven't found the winning recipe to release it. I was having trouble finishing the game against aggro decks. I was having trouble against Boba, like a lot of Luke decks do. And of course, my favorite card came in to save the day, which is Vigilance. Against your Sabines, Vigilance is able to buy you that time, 2-for-1, take out a guy and heal you 5, which is a huge base total swing against a deck like that, which really flipped the matchup on its head and made it way closer and way easier to navigate. And then against Boba, just being able to finish off some of those scrummy ground units, whether it's a Vader that ambushed in and killed a Kanan, or hopefully not your Luke, or a fire spray that attacks into a patrol craft, something like that. Just that ability to 2-for-1 and give yourself some breathing room with the healing buys you time for your late game units like your Luke Skywalker or your Luke unit to come in and take over the game. One line that I found really helpful against Boba is using the units in the sky for the first couple turns before dropping something like a Kanan to give breathing room for your Luke. That's been a more successful line that I'll talk about later. But the package here is really strong. You take the really good early game red units, your Sabines, your A-Wings, you pair it with some of the red removal like Open Fire, and then you use the blue to kind of carry you later into the game. You use the sustain, you use the force abilities, and then the backdrop is the rebel characteristic that lets you buff your units, lets you action cheat with Fleet Lieutenant and trade. So it's a really strong strategy. I think it's prime to take to your local. I think it's really close if you know the lines to bring to a bigger tournament. And I want to compare it to a deck like Chariot because I know that's very popular, and I love Chariot and I play a lot of Chariot. But sometimes with Chariot, I found that the hands I were getting were so junky between the pumps and multiple lightsabers, and it binds things. Luke needs a lot less resources like someone than Chariot. So you're able to kind of avoid that issue of these pump-heavy, junky hands that need to take Chariot to the next step. All you really need is Luke himself and maybe a Luke's lightsaber, and he's off to the races. You still have access to Force Throw, albeit usually a little later, unless you can stick one of your Force units, which you have the shielding ability to make that happen a little better. But Luke also gives you a really strong turn 1 play with R2, shield him up, pair it with Tarkin Town or a Wing Leader. You can take over the ground pretty well there. And I think the late game blue stuff from Hero is really strong. Luke's an amazing unit. Obi-Wan is really hard to get through for a lot of decks. And Redemption is a win condition against aggro, and it's not a slouch if you just play it regularly. You'll notice my sideboard is very much paired against control because my main deck is trying to fight aggro. K2 comes in, and your plan is between K2, Force Throw, and Force Surrender. You're trying to strip their hand against the control decks. And some slower mid-range decks, like maybe a Han that could be good against. And then I'm opting for Baze right now is just a little bit more room on the ground against your Sabines and possibly against Boba, just as a big booty guy to get in there and keep some ground units to back up Luke, because if Boba gets ahead, it can be hard. So you usually want to go to and I'll talk about this later, you usually want to go to space, then push it to the ground through Luke. But yeah, I think this deck is a lot of fun. I think it's strong, and I think it is primed to go and crush your locals with. Okay, so why Luke? Like I said, he is a boss when he hits the battlefield. A 4/7, really hard to remove, And if you have Luke's lightsaber, I mean, forget about it. 7/7 with the shield, sometimes healing himself is just kind of insane. Pair him with someone like Obi-Wan Kenobi to back him up, and now you have two guys that can't be moved. But beyond that, his shield ability, I think, is being underutilized. Vigilance and aggression have really good space units. Ones that you can undercast and still get some pretty good value out of because of the Rebel suite using Wing Leader and using Fleet Commander. So starting with stuff like A-Wing and Restore Arc, giving the second, on the second turn of shield, you're able to follow up with Wing Leader or Fleet Lieutenant and really push the pressure, either taking over the skies or hitting the opponent's base for a good amount while, giving yourself room to not fall behind to their attacks with, the Restore Arc healing you. Another thing that is important about that shield is as you undercurve some of your Restore units or, my favorite play is a turn 1 R2, giving it a shield, pairing that with Tarkin Town and again, some of the Rebel cards. You can really utilize that ability. So you can't do it all the time, but, 1 to 2 times a game before he flips is going to be really impactful to help you stay afloat and give yourself breathing room to get Luke out there. So like I talked about, the big draw to this deck and the big draw to these colors I'm playing are the Rebel aspects. Starting with R2 and shielding him, the next turn you can take out a ground unit. Even if you need to keep the initiative and maybe not shield him, you can pair that with Tarkin Town, say you don't have the pump. So you're able to take over the ground pretty well with just a 1-cost unit for the early turns, which is really impressive. And then Green Squadron A-Wing is the best early drop ship in the game. Its ability, it's three health is really good, especially if you're able to Wing Leader and get it up to 5, and then it hits for 3. So I mean, nothing you haven't heard, but yeah, Green Squadron A-Wing is the real deal in the skies. Not on the scene is Restore Arc, which is also a great card because of its stat line and its ability to restore can keep you in the fight against aggressive decks. So just using that Rebel synergy early, whether it is to make a bigger unit with Wing Leader or just trade up or push damage, you kind of have a flexible route you can go, which is what makes this a really good mid-range strategy, whether you need to play the control in a matchup or if you have to push pressure on the opponent's base and give yourself room to get Luke out there. So, without cover fire, your guys are going to fall behind. So using this removal suite to keep your guys alive, say I'm using an early make an opening to effectively, neuter an opposing unit and then clean it up with one of yours, or whether you just want to race them and hit them with an open fire or hit them with a takedown and keep pushing the pressure. These colors are going to let you do that. One of the best cards, I think, in the game right now, if you're able to use it, is Force Throw. Whether you Force Throw target yourself and use one of your big units to take something out like a leader, right? You have 6, 7, and 8 cost units in your deck. You can just discard your own card. 2 for 1 yourself, but getting rid of a leader, which is the most powerful units pretty much in the game, is a really strong draw to these colors in this deck. And you play a lot of Force users, and Luke is a Force user. This is a card that I found that I want to use later rather than earlier to make sure that I'm getting the most value out of it. But there are times where your opponent is sitting on only a couple cards, maybe 1 or 2, and it's late in the game and you can actually catch a really big threat out of their board and 2 for 1 them. So it's just got a lot of versatility. It's a really strong card to build around. And then open fire is just your standard removal that's going to go a long way, either to cleaning somebody up or keeping units off the board so you can effectively attack them and they can't get you back. So cover fire, really important. All right, the big draw to blue, hero is the sustain, and you're going to see my new favorite card on the right, Vigilance. This card is pretty much going in all my blue decks right now because it's just incredible. Taking out a 3 health unit and healing 5 from your base is such a massive base swing that you're you're able to buy time for Luke, like we've talked about in the beginning, but you're also able to race your opponent. And that becomes important against decks like Boba Fett and decks like Sabine, where you've put a little damage early, you start to clean them up, and you need to put yourself out of range for their burn spells. Vigilance important there. Restore Arc, unsung hero of hero ships. Consistently healing 1 a turn is going to go a long way. It's going to negate, at least a whole attack from your opponent. And sometimes they feel like they have to get rid of it, and it saved you a few damage there. Yoda and Kanan are going to be your heavy hitters in terms of fighting against aggro strategies, but you have to find time to protect them. Yoda right now gets kind of eaten up by a lot of things in the meta, so finding the right space to drop him, not just immediately dropping him on 3 when maybe you don't have initiative on the 4 resource turn, because he dies to things like an ECL'd K2 or 5 resources, he gets eaten up by Bosk. So just being careful to deploy him when it's safe. If he sticks around, that Restore 2, again, is going to buy you a lot of time. But even if they take him out, you can trade back with like a Tarkin Town, and he saved you damage and got you a card. And then Kanan, harder to remove, and the 4/5 with Rebel, you can pair him with some of those Rebel cards we talked about, the Wing Leaders, the Fleet Lieutenants, and he can give you a lot of breathing room as well. So good sustain out of the blue, big draw for that, and better than the some of the villain stuff because of all these restore units. So that's a big draw to this color palette. Now, it wouldn't be a mid-range deck without some really strong finishers, and we have them here. Like we've talked about, Luke pairing with his lightsaber is incredible. And then you have Luke unit, which is a bomb in of itself. The stat line is great. He can take out a fire spray. He can take out a whole 6 health leader, which is really good. And even the 3/3, being able to give yourself breathing room, whether it's to finish off a unit or to keep a unit smaller in size so someone else can clean him up, is kind of a thing I've seen. But if you untap with him, the 3 restore and the 6 healing, that's a differentiation of 9 if you attack their base. Is a big deal. And then redemption, sometimes it's just fodder for your force throw to make sure you take something out, but against more aggressive strategies, this is your win condition, and you're using cards like Make an Opening, your restore units, your vigilance to buy time to hit a redemption, because it's kind of like if you get it, you win the game. So huge finisher, and it's a good stat line for a ship even if you don't heal that much. So pretty great. So a prominent deck in the meta right now is Sabine, and I found that these are the best cards to combat it, either starting with a Green Squadron A-Wing or an R2 on your first turn, and following it up with Open Fire on their turn 2 play. You've given yourself a lot of room to get to your Vigilance, to even, believe it or not, get to your Luke and your Redemption, but it has to start with those cards. So really prioritizing Open Fire in either R2 or A-Wing is going to go a long way. It's going to be a messy one. You're going to save your Tarkin Town for when they ambush, with ECL. Another unsung hero, it's not on the screen, is Wing Leader. They don't have a lot. They don't have tap down. They don't have bounces. So buffing up your guys are going to make them harder to remove, and you're going to get more value out of them. And if you're able to get to those later turns and drop a Vigilance, there's a snowball effect that all this healing, like Make an Opening and Vigilance and Restore units has that I've talked about, that are going to buy you more time. And the more time you buy against Sabine, the better it is for you as the Luke player. All right, so zooming in on the sideboard because my big noggin was blocking it. Your and it's a little blurry for the zoom, but you guys will be okay. Your Force Surrenders, your K2s, and your Vanquish are coming in against Control. Your Vanquish and your Bays are going to come in against Boba, and your Bays are going to come in against Aggro. And it's up, as you play the games, you're going to figure out what works for you. But I found that against Boba, Yoda is really not doing it for you, and you can probably cut an Obi just because he is really bad into a waylay. So he's kind of this situational card that you need to play. Some of your early stuff, like your R2s, can go against aggro. So your R2s can kind of go against control. You have enough aggressive cards there to pressure them, and you don't always need the card filtering. And obviously, make an opening against control is not what you're trying to do. But it's a pretty tight deck list, and I think it runs well, and I think you are going to enjoy it. All right, so I just wanted to touch on the game plan against Boba a little bit more. I know I've talked about it, but your early turns, turn 1 and 2, you really want to be committing to space. It's okay if you play A-Wing first turn, second turn attack with it, then Wing Leader. You get the damage in, and if they want to take their turn to waylay, they're a little bit behind and you still have a guy on the board, you're able to keep initiative and push in with a Fleet Lieutenant, or drop your Kanan then, because they don't have as much to interact with you. You just want to be careful of giving them easy ways to ramp early, because if they have Boba Fett too many turns ahead of your Luke, it's going to be really hard to claw back. But he's going to come out a little earlier, and you just got to put yourself in a good position to fight it. If you're able to stick a Force unit early enough that doesn't get removed, you can always look for the Force throw a Luke or a Redemption onto Boba. But if that doesn't work, you want to get chip damage on Boba, finish him off with a takedown or vigilance, and save the Force throw game 1 for the fire spray. Vigilance and takedown are going to do a lot of work for you. Don't sleep on open fire. It's not the best card against Boba, but it does clean people up. And make an opening. I found that if you can kill a crafty smuggler early, and obviously the 7th Fleet Defender, just go ahead and do it. I tried sandbagging it before, and I just got blown out by the pump spells, the surprise strikes, and stuff like that. So I don't think it's one to get cute with. Use it when you can. If you don't use it, you lose it. So might as well use it. But I feel pretty good if you get the matchups in and you follow those lines, you can start to claw those games and really put the pressure on them early. All right, guys, so that was the Aggression Luke deck tech. Let me know what you think in the comments. Let me know if you bring it to your local. I think it's a good, strong, fun deck that you can jam at your local gaming store, and I think it's one that, as we get future sets, can definitely get a lot better. So, yeah, I think it's one to look out for.